Good to see you guys this morning. It always is. Always look forward to Sunday mornings with you. And just seems like recently, along about Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm just thinking to myself, is it Sunday yet? Is it Sunday yet? Come on, Sunday. We're ready to go. And so I'm so glad you're here. And part of the reason I feel that way is because there's good people to see when I actually get here. And that always helps, doesn't it? Some of you are slugging it out in the trenches of life, walking with the Lord, living for Him the best you can. Sometimes we have hits, sometimes we have misses, but by God's grace, the love and His grace will carry the day and eventually get us all to a place where we can, it may not be the family that we've always pictured, but certainly can become the family we've always wanted in our heart of hearts. And so that's the series that we're in. And we're dealing with a subset of topics and themes within this broader series. And so this series will eventually go to some other family-related issues and things. But for now, we have to take some time to define some things. We have to take some time to really understand some of the issues that are on the table. And so I think it's so important that the spiral of silence be broken, and that we actually have the courage to talk about, to work through, to join the discussion on some critical things. And so we will continue the theme today that we began last week: marriage, homosexuality, and religious freedom. And today, eventually, I'm going to tell you three stories about three children who were raised in either lesbian or homosexual homes, and what they have to say about some of the things that are being discussed today. It seems like everybody's voice is getting heard except for theirs. And of all people's voices, they should be heard. Now listen, we had fun last week. It was awesome. Pictures of dancing couples popped up here and there on social media, and it was just so great. But how many of you know what photobombing is? Do you know what photobombing is? Yes, some of you know. Okay, some of you don't know. Well, it's when someone is taking a picture of something, or maybe they're taking a picture of someone, and you maybe see an opportunity to insert yourself into the picture just for fun. Or maybe you're taking a picture and the timing's just right, and an animal or a pet kind of photobombs your picture. Slide number 11 here, we'll look at some examples of this. So here's, I think the husky got some delight in photobombing the picture of the Labrador. He's having fun. Next slide. Here's some examples of photobombing. The little feline underneath the couch is peeking out. He's going to spoil it for the other little guy. Next slide. The seal down in the right hand. I think that's the picture that kind of started the whole photobombing phenomenon. So it's kind of interesting. Big largemouth bass, and the dog's going to photobomb. Go ahead. Great photobomb moment. Next one. Somebody's having fun with her friend there, the right corner. Next one. That's always fun. Next slide. Some dad having fun with his bride, his daughter. Okay, next slide. I don't know who that is, but I think it's like a popular movie star, and some couple was having their picture down in Times Square, and he decided to walk by and look up right at the right moment. Well, and last week, I think you'll find a specifically joyful to know that someone photobombed our dancing church couples last week. Pop that one up. I don't know if you can see it. The guy on the right hand side was photobombing our dancing church couples. So I think he probably has some fun with that. I don't know if you can see that very well if the light's bright, but so photobombing, it's fun. We had fun last week, and the dancing couples won the day. Okay, and that's what marriage is supposed to be. And if you weren't here last week, you really need to hear the message, because if you don't hear that message, you're probably going to misunderstand some things maybe I share today, or maybe you might even go away with some impressions that weren't intended. And so it's important, and so that's out there on our YouTube channel. Also, there are some tools for you to reference. Some of the letters and things that I'll be referencing today are available online. These are written by, like I said, some of the ladies who have gone through this, a same gendered parent situation, and they have are now writing letters and offering their observations and things on what that experience was like. And so these are available through the YouVersion Bible app, and so just know that you can access those things there. And I just want to say here, as we get started here again today, that no one is in need of God's grace more than I am. And so no matter who I reference in a message like this, or whomever I talk about in messages and things, whomever I might use as illustrations of my points and things, it will always be with the understanding that no one is in need of God's grace more than me, and I mean nobody. And so I just want you to know that. Now, one of the things that happens sometimes when you deal with topics like this, conversations get started, interaction begins to take place as it should, and so people are thinking about the topic and they're working through some of the issues related. And of course, everybody is so quick today to call people hate mongers and people who are intolerant. They're so quick to pull that trigger, and I just don't buy it for a second. We got to approach the topic. We got to talk about it in truth and in love, and so that's what we're doing here in this part of the series. But this past week, I caught wind of a conversation that was happening, and here's the essence of that conversation. Before you do anything, ask yourself the question, is this love? Is this love? Because everything anyone ever does is either an act of love or a cry for love. Now you think about that. Think about that. Is this love? And that's a question you can lead your life with. Because if you, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're going to have a conversation, you're thinking about doing something, you're thinking about saying something, you're thinking about communicating or posting something, the question is this love? Is it love? Because as these two ladies were discussing this week, one says, because everything anyone ever does is either an act of love or a cry for love. And you look at that, and some of the most hateful things sometimes that are spoken by people who just want love. They just need relationship. And they don't know any other way to go about having that relationship unless it maybe is controversial. And then that's their kind of left-handed way of having conversation with people and feeling the love that they need to feel from people. And so I want you to think about that. And I'm not so sure I could do a better job, really, of preaching that message other than what's come already out in that conversation. It's an act of love or a cry for love. The question is, what are you doing when it comes to crying out for love in your life? How are you going about that? And all that you do, is it an act of love? Does it stem from a motive of love? Well, last week I talked to you about Matthew 7, verses 3 through 5. It's slide number 3 on the screen. And in this passage, what we've got is it's some humor by Jesus, and it's also some hard-hitting facts by Jesus. And Jesus was he was a great communicator and things. And so he says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust, the tiny splinter or fiber that's in someone else's eye, and pay no attention to the plank or the rafter or the 2x4 that's in somebody else's eye, or that's in your own eye? In other words, deal with the stuff in your life. And when you deal with the stuff in your life that you think nobody sees but everybody does, you so easily get painfully annoyed at all the little things in life, maybe regarding an issue or a person or a type of person. But yet you've got this something so much bigger in your life, and you're pretending not to see it. And so how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank or a 2x4 in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eyes. And so basically when we think about this, and I got all kinds of things here. Let's see if I can find what I'm looking for. Yes, I've got it right here. Okay? You got two communities. You've got the Christian community, and we kind of take our issues and we take our viewpoints, and we begin to maybe articulate those. And then you've got the gay community, and they begin to articulate their positions and their issues and things, and really begin to sound the alarm on certain issues and what have you. And a lot of these things relate to religious freedom. I got a pair of tweezers. Let me get my 2x4. Okay. Yeah, I got my 2x4 here with me. It survived. Okay. It's a pretty big 2x4. And so, if you can picture what Jesus is trying to say. Okay. So you've got a guy with I got to keep this thing, the fulcrum about right, or I'm going to lose it. Okay. You've got a guy with a 2x4 sticking out of his head, and he's walking up to people, okay? Walking up to people. Duck your head on the front row. Oh, woo! There we go. Okay. He's walking up to people, and he's trying to tweezer out of people their issues in their life. You see the picture he's painting? I'm going to tweezer out the little stuff, I'm going to really focus on, well, you're always late, or you've got, you have this issue or this problem, and we're tweezering stuff out of people's eye. And all the while, we got this big plank sticking out of our head, as if we don't have a problem. And Jesus is like, come on, guys, you got to see this. Okay? And I'm just going to say regarding the Christian community, because I've been in it for a long time, 30 plus years, we got issues. We go to tweezer in everybody's life. We can do that very easily because, right? We're right and they're wrong, right? And we have issues. And we begin to tweezer out, as if we really understand how relationships work when you look at our own lives and marriages. As if we got it figured out. This big 2x4 sticking out of our head like this, and we're trying to tweezer out everybody's relational issues and problems. It's crazy. We're tweezer people. I've been in it a long time. This is how we work it. We're tweezer people. It's like Amazing Grace. Woo, I love that one. But be gracious to my coworker? What? I'm not showing grace. Man, Jesus died on a cross. Old rugged cross. That's awesome. Oh, you want me to lay down and be sacrificed? And be crucified to this issue in their life? No, they're paying. They're paying for it. I'm not suffering anything. They're going to suffer. We're tweezer people. We're tweezer people. In the garden. I come to the garden. In the garden. We love In the Garden. Right? Love that song. But if somebody breaks one of our roses in our garden, watch out. Right? We're tweezer people. We tweezer all day long. Okay? Bad attitudes. Unforgiveness. Alright? And we do this and this and this and this. And we are so contradictory as to what the gospel really is and what Christ is really about. We're tweezer people. And Jesus calls us on it. And so I call us on it as well in this series. We have to guard against the tweezer ideologies. We begin to tweezer and split hairs. And we begin to pick out the little things that we don't like. And we got these gigantic 2x4s of relational failure sticking out of our head. And it just creates more issues and more problems. And people see the hypocrisy of it. They see it. And they're turned off by it. And that's why, as a visionary leader of a new community of people, I want this to be a loving community of people, a truth-telling community. And if you heard last week, I'm going to bring it. I'm going to bring the truth. You don't worry about that. I'm on it. But I want us not just to be known for the sterile presentation of truth and belief systems and 2x4 issues, or sidetracked by tweezer issues. We don't want to be known for that. We want to be known as a loving, embracing, kind, forgiving community, because we all got 2x4 sticking out of our heads. And if we're all around each other long enough to see it, we're all going to be ducking on the front row because we're going to be doing this. Okay, and everybody's going to be ducking, getting out of the way. They see it, but we refuse to. Okay, we're tweezer people. Somebody needs to make a little skit on that, right? The tweezer people. I can just see it in my head, dramatic part of me. All right, that's who we are. And that's what we are many times. And so I'm just saying, and the question I would say this morning that I kind of began last week, is this love? And when I thought about the community of the church and how beautiful that community is, if people ever say, I feel more at home in the gay community or the hippie community than they feel in my church community, that's an indictment. I've got an issue with that. That's a problem. It should never, ever, ever be that way. We shouldn't be ducking around everybody's 2x4s in the church. We shouldn't be. We should be an open, vulnerable community where we are addressing the 2x4s in our lives personally, and then where we're able maybe to help others see things a little more clearly because of God's work in our own hearts and lives. And so, but what I thought about when I think about the community of the church, and like I said last week, gay individuals really miss the unconditional love they receive in the gay community. So it's a very open and loving community, affirming community. I think there's other issues within that community, and I'm going to get to the 2x4, the gay community, in just a second. But what I thought about was the book by Donald Miller, Blue Like Jazz, and he's entitled a chapter in that book, How to Really Love Other People. And I was intrigued by it. And so I kind of revisited some of those thoughts, and he says there was a time in his life when he was on the move, and he spent a lot of time with the hippies in the woods of Oregon. And he said, I encountered grace there like I'd never encountered anywhere else in any community of people. He said they smoked a lot of pot, they drank their share of beer, but they knew how to love me. Okay? They accepted and cherished people. And I was some stranger that kind of wandered in, and they took me in, he said. And he liked them because they were so interested in me. He said, we sat around and we talked about books. We would tell stories and share viewpoints. Miller said, so much of what I know about getting along with people, I learned from the hippies. They were magical in community. People were drawn to them. They asked me what I loved, what I hated, how I felt. What sort of music made me angry? What sort of music made me sad? They asked me what I daydreamed about, what I wrote about, what my favorite places in the world were. They asked me about high school and college and my travels around America. He said, I didn't feel subconscious. I didn't feel stupid. I didn't feel sloppily dressed. I was never conscious of what my hands were doing or not doing. I didn't feel this need to sound spiritual. He says, I just kind of forgot myself when I was with the hippies in Oregon. He says, I lost the self-consciousness I often have in other places. But he says, I gained so much more. I gained an interest in people outside my skin. They were greater than movies to me, Miller writes. They were greater than television. The spirit of the hippies, it was contagious. I couldn't hear enough about Eddie's ballerina girlfriend or Owen's epic poems. I would ask them to repeat stories because to me, they were like great scenes in favorite movies. I cannot tell you how quickly these people, these pot-smoking hippies, disarmed me. Now listen. I'm not advocating finding a commune of hippies and living that life. Okay? I'm not advocating a gay community life at all. But what I'm amplifying this morning is how this notion of community is life-changing, and when the church does it right and demonstrates the kind of Christ's sacrificial love and grace, and they demonstrate that and they live that out in openness and vulnerability, there is absolutely nothing more appealing, more beautiful, more attractive, and enticing in the entire world. And if people prefer the company of hippies or homosexuals over authentic, nothing-to-hide Christ followers, then we've got a 2x4 sticking out of our eye, and they have the speck. I ask you, is this love? Is it love? There was a Tumblr question asked. Let's just pull that up real quick in case you're wondering, and perhaps you are, about, what if I have a child who is identifying themselves as homosexual or gay, and they're kind of wearing that label, and they've kind of committed themselves to that label maybe, or maybe they're still questioning, can I be assured that your church would love my gay or lesbian or transgender child? Can I be sure of it? I'm a parent. I love my kids. I don't know exactly what's happened in their life, but I know they need the Lord. They need a community of people that will love them and that will come alongside them as they work through issues in their life. Will you love them? Well, absolutely. And when you think about it, I'm not here on a Sunday morning or any other time really to decide who can share a testimony of Thanksgiving. I'm not here to decide who is right and wrong if they sing a song, a spiritual song. I'm not here. I don't stand here in communion time and say, oh, you're a sinner and you can't. You're a sinner and you can't. If I started doing that, there'd be nobody doing communion. I've been here 10 years. I probably know enough about everybody to get at least half of you fired. Okay? Probably. You'd be surprised. You know what, though? I'm not going to do that. And we can't do it. We can't. You got to love people. They're sinners like you and me. We got to love people. Proclaim the truth, but man, let the love of people, proclaiming truth, loving people. You got to have both in a well-balanced tandem arrangement. Okay, and so here's what I say. I'm not going to perform gay wedding ceremonies. I'm not gonna marry someone to another person who has not remained true to their gender at birth, because this does not mean that they will be treated with disrespect. Quite the contrary. Plus, love will be extended, and they can join a small group if they would like, with all of us other sinners. Okay, we're not going to just specify one group of sinners. Okay, if you're a part of us, we're not looking at you as a gay this or gay that or homosexual this or homosexual that. You're a sinner. Can we leave it at that? Can you be identified with a new label, an in Christ label, like we all have? Can we just be in Jesus? Amen. Let's just be in Jesus here. Let's not try to tease out these different kinds and groups of sinners. Okay? That's a mistake to do. Plus, love will be extended, and they can join small groups, as I said, and they can join the discussion, and they can talk about their deep belonging needs. Now listen, when it comes to church leadership, we got to evaluate those situations on case-by-case basis, okay? So we're not making any guarantees there. We want leaders who respect our values, as any other organization with a vision would want. And our vision, what is it? What is it? It's been this for several years. To lead people to God's forgiveness and see them restored to all they were intended to be. Gay marriage hinders full life restoration, and therefore we don't endorse it. We don't support it. In fact, I'll show you why we shouldn't. But being a part of a church facilitates a true recovery. That's love. That's love. And that's how we want to be. That's how we want to love. That's how we want to be the body of Jesus. Okay? And we want to address these 2x4 issues sticking out of our head. All right? These 2x4 issues sticking out of our head, out of our community, to address these community issues. And by addressing them openly and honestly, creating the kind of community, we want to create an atmosphere, guys. It's an atmosphere. When you pull into the parking lot, when you walk into the building, you hear something from the Word of God that's right, that's brought home with love and compassion. You encounter people who understand they're sinners just like you. People who are looking to see you come and journey with us for a while to help us, deal with the issues in our life. And so that's the beauty of the body of Christ, and it's so beautiful. And we should never be trumped by the likes of gay community. We should never be trumped by the likes of a hippie community. We should never be trumped by those hillbillies in West Virginia. We should never be trumped by these other subsets of communities and cultures in the world. We should never be trumped by the likes of any of it. This should be the most appealing, attractive, powerful, transformative, life-changing body of a group of people anywhere you'll find the world. That's the beauty of the church. And that's the beauty I hold out to you. And now that's the 2x4 that's kind of sticking out of the head of those in the church. And we are tweezer people. We do this, and we got 2x4s sticking out of our head. And it maybe is comical after a while, but it's pretty sobering when you think about it. Okay? And maybe it was kind of a funny word picture that Jesus gave, but he kind of disarms us with the humor, I think, to help us really see the gist of what he's trying to say, and I think we see it here. Now the gay community, once again, as we look at the gay community and we think about these 2x4s and the analogy that Jesus gave, the gay community will tout itself as this all-embracing, progressive group of people. You'll hear that a lot. They're free of traditional restraints. We'll take anybody in without condition. And yet they have this huge 2x4 sticking out of their head. They're pretending like they have no idea what they're doing to marriage and the family. Okay? You're pretending like you don't know what happens when you redefine marriage. It's actually redefining parenting. And you're pretending like you don't know this. No matter what the analysts say, no matter what the experts say from secular universities who have no vested interest in supporting the cause of Christianity. You're ignoring this. Okay? You're ignoring the evidence of the things that we're discovering, the people that have walked through these kinds of living arrangements. All right? The gay community, they have their tweezers, okay? And they're picking out cakes and flowers and sermons and wedding photographs. They're just really focusing on that and trying to pull those splinters out, and they have no idea they're destroying the very children that's in their home. Big 2x4, leveling those guys, longing for a mom and a dad. And they take that 2x4 and just ram it through the family as if they don't know. Guys, they have issues as well. The Christian community's got issues. The gay community's got issues. And they're forcing children to repress the normal feelings they have for a mother and a father. And again, it doesn't matter. These kids, they're sexually confused. They're socially damaged. Statistically, you wouldn't believe the statistical evidence of those who who are raised in these kinds of arrangements. What they have to go through, delinquency rates and things, it just spikes to high heaven when they're raised in these same parent arrangements. All right? And the children, though, who have been raised in these arrangements are now finding their voice. And they're saying, don't do this, America. Don't redefine marriage. We were raised in a redefined marriage arrangement or living arrangement. We wanted a dad. We wanted a mom. And my same-sex parents denied me that opportunity. This huge 2x4 is sticking out of their heads. And you can dress it up in all the different ways we like to dress these issues up. You can dress it up in the country music of Shelley Wright. You can dress it up in the funny talk show host such as an Ellen. And Shelley's a great singer. Ellen is a great witty person with a wonderful personality. Okay? You can dress it up in the interpretational twist of a Matthew Vine. okay, who's written a book on gay Christianity. But when it's all said and done, you got to hear me on this, church. When it's all said and done, those who are raised in these living arrangements, something more than good country music, something more than a funny mother, something more than a well thought out argument. They're craving a mama and a daddy who snap them in to the gender cues and clues of what it means to be raised in a family with a mother and a father. Sing, that's fine. Crack jokes, that's fine. Present well-reasoned arguments in published documents, that's great. But we just want a mom and a dad. And I ask you, is this love? Consider Katie Faust. Slide number 25. She was raised by a lesbian couple who suggested recently that redefining marriage necessarily includes redefining parenthood. Very, very valid point. 38 years old now, Katie loves both her moms, her mom who got divorced, and the lesbian partner of her mother who helped to raise her, but that doesn't mean Katie's neutral on the issue of same-sex marriage. Listen to this. Recently, Katie wrote a powerful open letter to Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, who's widely considered to be the swing vote in the coming High Court decision on this issue this summer. The letter, which was published in the journal Public Discourse, and I think I made it available through the YouVersion app tools, so you can reference it there if you want to read it in its entirety. But she argues that the rights of children must trump the feelings of adults. Well, I want to be happy. I deserve to be happy. And that trumps everything else. Children, wrote Faust, have a natural fundamental right to the dual gender influence of their biological parents. The adults in this scenario, she writes, they satisfy their heart's desires while the child bears the most significant cost, missing out on one or more of her biological parents. Natural marriage matters for everyone, she says. And vast human experience confirms that. Where marriage is honored, where there is flourishing marriage culture, everyone benefits. The spouses benefit. The children benefit. The communities and societies in which they live benefit. And where the marriage is redefined to be anything other than how God has defined it, you have all of this quick erosion of the social fabric, and all of these social pathologies begin to manifest themselves in so many different ways in the lives of those who are raised in these kinds of families. She says, my parents' divorce has been the most traumatic event in my 38 years of life. I love my mother's partner and her friends, but I would have traded every last one of them to have had a mom and a dad loving me under the same roof. Faust notes, this isn't just about being against same-sex marriage. She says it's about being for marriage between one man and one woman, because that's the gift God gave humans for blessing and flourishing. And so Katie Faust herself, the product of a same-sex household, says that while she loves her mother and her partner and appreciates their efforts, nothing could fulfill the father-shaped vacuum in her heart and life. When a child is being raised in a same-sex environment, she says, and when they are being parented by two women or two men, they cannot arrive in that family situation without experiencing loss and brokenness. I was one of them. She says, now that I'm a parent, I see clearly the beautiful differences my husband and I bring to our family. I see how important the role of their father is, how irreplaceable I am as their mother. Neither of us is disposable, and yet sadly, same-sex marriage asserts without any evidence that mothers and fathers are disposable. They're interchangeable. It's a genderless marriage in the life of their children. And Katie Faust says, pish posh. Not buying it. I want to tell you about Heather Barwick. Slide 24. Heather Barwick was raised by her mother and her mother's same-sex partner. She's a former gay marriage advocate, and she's turned now to children's rights activist. She's now married. She's a wife. She's a mother of 4 rambunctious kids. She writes a letter to the gay community, and there's this essence of truth in it. You can just tell she's not a splinter kind of focused kind of person. She's looking at this huge 2x4 in this community's head, and she's addressing it. And she says, gay community, I am your daughter. She says, my mom raised me with her same-sex partner back in the 80s and 90s. My dad wasn't a great guy, and after she left him, my mom left him, he didn't bother coming around anymore. And she says, do you remember that book, Heather Has Two Mommies? That was my life. My mom and her partner and I lived in a cozy little house in the burbs of a very liberal and open-minded area. Along with my mom's partner, I inherited her tight-knit community of gay and lesbian friends, or maybe they inherited me, she says. Either way, I still feel like gay people are my people. To this day, she says, I feel that way. I've learned so much from you. You've taught me to be brave, she says, especially when it's hard. You've taught me empathy. You taught me how to listen and how to dance. And you taught me not to be afraid of things that are different. And you taught me how to stand up for myself. And even if that means I stand alone, you taught me so much, she says. I'm writing to you because I'm letting myself out of the closet, though. I don't support gay marriage, but it might not be for the reasons that you think. She says, it's not because you're gay. I love you. I love you so much, she says. It's because of the nature of the same-sex relationship itself, she says. It's only now, as I watch my own children loving and being loved by their father every day, that I can see the beauty and the wisdom in traditional marriage and parenting. Growing up, and even into my 20s, Barwick says, I supported and advocated for gay marriage, and it's only with some time and distance from my childhood that I'm able to reflect on my experiences, and I recognize the long-term consequences that same-sex parenting has had on me. And it's only now, as I watch my 4 rambunctious children loving and being loved by their father every day, it's only now that I can see the beauty and the wisdom in traditional marriage and parenting. Heather Barwick. Same-sex marriage, she says, and parenting withholds either a mother or a father from a child while telling him or her that it doesn't matter. That's all the same. That it's all the same, but it's not, she says. A lot of your kids are hurting. My father's absence created a huge hole in me, and I ache every day for a dad. And I love my mom's partner, but another mom could never have replaced the father I lost. I grew up surrounded by women, she says, who said they didn't need or want a man. And yet as a little girl, I so desperately wanted a dad. This deep down unquenchable ache for a father, for a man, for masculinity in a community that says that men were unnecessary. She said, it just perplexed me. I didn't know what to do with it. She says, I'm not saying that you can't be good parents. You can. I had one of the best. But I'm also not saying that being raised by straight parents means everything will turn out okay either. We know that there are so many different ways that the family unit can break down and cause kids to suffer divorce and abandonment and infidelity and abuse and death. But by and large, the best and most successful family structure is one in which kids are being raised by both their mother and their father. And here's a former lesbian activist, gay activist, who has now turned children's activist, who has actually lived the lifestyle that so many are referencing. She's lived through it, and she's basically saying, if you make this legal, if you make this the law of the land, it's a mistake. The children will suffer. And she questions in her letter to the gay community. She says, why can't gay people's kids be honest? Now think about this. Gay marriage doesn't redefine marriage, but also parenting. It promotes and normalizes a family structure that necessarily denies us something precious and foundational. It denies us something, she says, we need and long for, while at the same time tells us that we don't need what we naturally crave. That we will be okay. But we're not okay. If anyone can talk about hard things, it's us, she says. Listen, kids of divorced parents are allowed to say, hey, Mom and Dad, I love you, but the divorce crushed me and has been so hard. It shattered my trust and made me feel like it was my fault. It is so hard living in two different houses. They're allowed to say that. Kids of adoption are allowed to say, hey, adoptive parents, I love you, but this is really hard for me, and I suffer because my relationship with my first parents was broken, and I'm confused, and I miss them even though I've never met them, and they're allowed to say that. But children of same-sex parents haven't been given the same voice, Barwick notes. It's not just me. She said, there are so many of us who are too scared to speak up and tell you about our hurt and pain because for whatever reason, it feels like you're not listening, that you don't want to hear. If we say we are hurting because we were raised by same-sex parents, we are either ignored or labeled a hater. And I ask you, is this love? The final story I share with you today, this series of 3 stories, is the story of Don Stefanowitz, slide 23. Don Stefanowitz has written an especially insightful book. I read all of it. It's called Out From Under: The Impact of Homosexual Parenting. She said she wouldn't have written the book if her parents had still been alive. She would want them to save face and things, but they have both moved on and passed away. And so her father died of AIDS. Her mother endured just unspeakable things, and I'll tell you that in just a second. But she says in her foreword to this book, she said, there are many times when I wish I could get together with my dad for a chat and share a light-hearted laugh, to do something together, to sit together, maybe just sit quietly and talk. She said such times together didn't happen often when he was on earth because he was always engrossed in his business or extra familiar friendships. More than anything else during my growing up years, Stefanowitz writes, I just wanted a dad with me, providing strong, nurturing masculinity, a real sense of attention and affection. She wanted this, she craved this, but she realized that his ability, her father's ability to give his children the attention and affection that they so desperately needed, it was weakened by his own neediness and his restless search for another father-type individual in his life who would love and affirm and attend to him. He wanted acceptance and belonging just like she did. He longed for and sought to obtain the sort of male companionship and love that he had never known as a child. But as he sought to meet his own emotional needs through his gay lifestyle, the legitimate needs of his own children were often ignored, she writes. She says, I have to forgive my father again and again to avoid becoming enmeshed in bitterness. I hate what that's done to our family, what homosexuality has done to our family. She says, I've written this book not out of spite, though, but with the desire to get out from under the wreckage created when the sexual boundaries are obscured and when a home falls apart like this. She said very openly, my father engaged in ongoing sexual escapades with young men during his teen years, acting out the earlier sexual abuse he had suffered from older relatives. He wanted the normality of what he thought a marriage would bring, but as Dawn looks over the life of her parents and the marriage of their parents, she realizes that what he really wanted was a wife to cook and clean and dote on his every need and demand, while she discreetly looked the other way during his frequent dalliances with other men. She describes her mother and the struggles that her mother had. But she says, I desired my father's presence so much. Mom was starved for my dad's affection and attention. And Dawn said, I wanted to be taken up and embraced for a long time by Dad, but it never happened. Even when Dad took me out on the park on a little outing, his attentions were otherwise engaged. Even when Dawn's dad was pushing her in the swing, he says, I sensed his absence. Oh, he was there. He was doing the fatherly thing. But I sensed his absence as he would make these vulgar comments about other people who happened to walk by in the park. Her father would take her on bike rides through well-known gay cruising areas. Sometimes the family would be biking together, and her dad and his boyfriend would go off alone together without them. Sometimes he would ditch the kids at the local pool and go find someone else to be with. At gay beaches, this dad took her everywhere. And she says, I went because I was hoping he noticed me finally. I would go with him wherever he wanted to go because I wanted him to finally value me for who I was. Over the years, she tells about her father's boyfriends that he brought into their family. How that he wasn't even faithful to them, and how that many of those boyfriends committed suicide and others died of AIDS. But Dawn says, I never had this close bond with my father like all of them had, and it killed me. All I ever wanted was pure fatherly affection. A simple kiss on the cheek, a reassuring hug. And if he ever gave me such proper attention as a child, I don't remember it. They would take family trips on vacations. New York, San Francisco, Miami. Get this. Her father would leave the family at the hotel with no car to go cruise the gay districts in the community. And Dawn said, my mom just came along on any trip. Even though his boyfriends were present, she did not complain about Dad being out late with Steve, checking out the downtown nightlife. But she was so hurt, so humiliated, hopelessly entangled in this relationship with this defector of a husband and a father. Dawn's brothers saw things they should have never seen. Should never seen it. She says, my brothers wondered why their dad could kiss other men, strangers even, but never express affection to his own sons. She never remembers him spending any time with her brothers. She feels that he effectively destroyed the possibility of anyone ever being happy in their family. And her mother broke with delirious pain. She experimented with things that broke her life even more. And what pain when the children stayed in their hotel room. Dawn's dad and his homosexual lover in another. And her mother all alone in her own room on vacation. Her mom was once crying over the death of a family member. And she pleaded with her homosexual husband to hold her. And yet his arms remained stiffly by his side. Spent on the illicit sexual drunkenness of human lust and love. Or what is thought to be love. Now listen to Dawn speak to us. She said, I questioned my sexual identity because I lived in that kind of home. I second-guessed every relationship in my life. Living in that kind of a family, I assumed, I even dreaded that I would have to someday experiment sexually because that's what people do raised in these kinds of families. I had no idea who I was. I felt uncomfortable and ambivalent in the company of female friends. I couldn't relate to their easy chatter about boys and shopping and teachers and summer vacations. I didn't bond with boys. I didn't bond with girls during my teenage years. I saw everyone as transient, not unlike my father's relationships in the subcultures in which he traversed and lived. I just thought all relationships were that way. She tells about putting on a man's shirt in these confusing days and somehow feeling the masculinity that she so desperately needed in her life. Just a flannel shirt that a man would typically wear. She said, I came to recognize that his own great and unmet need was the very same as mine. The absence of a loving father. And no matter how well I performed, I never could make my father value me for who I was. I wasn't just feeling rage at a father who had never been there for me or affirmed me for who I was. Dawn says, when I began to become whole, what was finally emerging from my life was the flip side of all that I'd never seen. She says, I was blindsided by the powerful attractiveness of all the masculine virtues I had never seen in our family. And what makes it so hard for a girl to grow up with a gay father is she never gets to see him loving, honoring, or protecting the women in his life. An innate sense of my feminine being was starting to bloom, she says. After being abused and rejected for so many years, I was luxuriating for the first time in my life to the full rightness of my own womanhood. It took masculinity to help her realize her femininity. And Dawn's father later became a Christ follower. He was filled with regret over the way he had treated his family in his best years. His family had careened out of control. He was wasting away with AIDS. And near the end, Dawn says she went to see her father. The first thing I noticed was how thin he had become. His face was sullen and his eyes sunken and dim, as if covered by translucent lids. He could no longer walk. Under layers of blankets and covers, I could see the outline of his now useless legs buckled up at the knees. He was in an incredible amount of pain. The AIDS was canceling all immunity to the cancer that was ravaging his body. And on page 214, she ironically writes, here was the man whose attention I'd always longed to hold for long enough that we could just talk. And finally, he was still now. He wasn't turning away from me or trying to get out the door to be with someone else. Here he is. But he's wasted. Over. I ask you, is this love? Watch Dawn share her story.
Growing up,
you've been a great group, and I'm just nudging you each week, nudging you toward a direction I think we need to go. And how we think about these things. And so come next week, we'll get into the definition of marriage. We'll begin to get into the purposes of marriage. I kind of outlined that for you already. These tools are available to you through the YouVersion app and through the Facebook page. You can link it from there. I can't help but think that maybe there's some people here broken this morning, and this has touched a raw nerve deep in your heart and your life. And I would hate to think that we let you go out of here before taking a step of healing. And so what I'd like us to do is I'm going to say a prayer for everybody, and I'm going to let people go. But you guys, after I say my prayer, go ahead and just pull that song up that we've got. Thank you. And we'll just play that as our benediction. Just feel free to talk and visit like you always do. But we're just going to have that song playing. And if there's brokenness in your life, you'd like us to pray for you. And this stuff goes deep, guys. It goes deep. We're not raised in vacuums. There's reasons why we do things and why we have proclivities in certain directions. There's reasons. And so it can tie to a lot of things. And so we just want you to know we are aware of it. And we want you to feel enfolded in the community and the life of the church today. So we'll give you an opportunity to come up. I'll have the prayer team come out and we'll circle around you and pray with you if you'd like to, okay? All right. A family you've always wanted. Is this love? Let's think about it. Let's live it. Let's pray. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for the examples. Heather Barwick, Don Stavanowitz. Thank you so much for Katie Faust. These are voices from within a community that maybe we're not so familiar with. And they're trying to speak truth. And they're trying to get the lawyers to listen, the judges to listen. They're trying to get the radical homosexual community to listen. They're trying to get a voice. They're trying to, Dr. Oscar Lopez, trying to articulate for people, don't go this route. Don't go this route. Help us to spread the word. Help us to share the story that God is a God of love. He invites all of us to come home to His Father heart. And He gives us all the invitation. No matter where we've been, what we've done, who we're with, how we got there, the Father is on the road to home and He awaits. And maybe that's what they need this morning. Someone here needs that message. And I pray that they would just come running home. Come running home and discover brand new what it means to accept their gender. Brand new what it means to be attracted to someone of the opposite sex, maybe for the first time. Or maybe someone brand new to Christ. Brand new to the new way of thinking here. Brand new to truth. Other kinds of brokenness in their life. We like to see them have a family they've always wanted. And maybe that can begin today. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thank you. You've been a great group. You're dismissed, and we'll pick it up next week.